6 minutes until Bible class starts up here at the building, but we wanted to continue what we've been doing for the last several weeks and bring a devotional to all of you who are watching from home, since we're not live streaming our Bible class tonight. I've had one of those weeks. In fact, it's been a few weeks now that I am just tired and worn out, not without joy, just perhaps without rest. And so as I was preparing for this, I decided, I'm just going to give them a verse that I find comforting and that gives me a spirit of purpose. So Matthew chapter 11, I'm going to start in verse 27, and then you'll see the part that I want you to examine. He says, "All things have been handed over to me by my Father, and no one knows the Son except the Father, nor does anyone know the Father except the Son, and anyone to whom the Son reveals to him." So Jesus is in the process of revealing the Father's will to the lives of those who put their faith in him. That is God's plan and God's sovereignty on your life, but also there's a part that you play. There's a part that you have to give up of yourself and go to Jesus. He continues in verse 28. Look at this. "Come to me, all who are weary and heavy laden," or yours might say heavy burdened, "and I will give you rest." Rest sounds so good right now. I have just been running at a fast pace, doing a lot of good things, and hopefully just finding some ways to glorify God in my ministry and in my life. And yet it takes a toll. It wears you out. There's times where you go, you know what, I am weary and I do want rest. And so now we see what kind of rest is Jesus talking about here. So he says in verse 29, "Take my yoke upon you and learn from me, for I am gentle and humble in heart, and you will find rest for your souls," mine says. So this is a different kind of rest. This is a kind of rest that your soul gets. Tell me, have you ever been on vacation? And you get a few days in, you're not really doing much, and you kind of feel like, my body's rested, my mind's rested, but my soul is anxious. I just feel discontent, like I'm not satisfied yet. Or what about the opposite? Have you ever been just bone tired, and yet because of what you've accomplished, because of what you've produced, because of how God has blessed you in your life, your soul is at peace and knows joy and is at rest? He says, "Take my yoke upon you and learn from me, for I am gentle and humble in heart, and you will find rest for your souls. For my yoke is easy and my burden is light." I look at that and I go, is it easy? Is the yoke of Christ easy as a Christian? What does Jesus mean by that? Sometimes it doesn't feel easy, does it? In fact, in Matthew chapter 7, verse 14, I believe, he says, "Narrow is the gate and hard is the path that leads to life." And so sometimes it feels hard. Sometimes it is hard. And yet he says, if you come to me, I will give you rest. My yoke is easy, my burden is light, and I will give you rest for your souls. That word yoke there is one that I want you to think about for a moment. When we think of carpenters, we think of people who build tables and chairs and maybe help work on houses. In that time period, carpenters built all sorts of things. All kinds of things were made out of wood. And so sure, furniture, but maybe also toys. Another thing that they would build is agriculture equipment. So it was the carpenters that would build the yokes for the farmers. So now we have padded and metal yokes, and for any countries that are still using yokes and oxen today, in that time period they were crafted from wood. And not only were they crafted from wood, they had to be very expertly crafted by a good carpenter, so that carpenter would be so that yoke would be well fitted for the beast of burden that would carry that load. So when Jesus says, "Take my yoke," Jesus as the master carpenter, "Take my yoke upon you, for it is easy." My yoke is easy. That word easy, literally in the original language, is something like comfortable or well-fitting. Jesus is saying, the yoke that I have for you is made for you. It's well fitting for you. Jesus, as the carpenter, is saying, if you put on my yoke, it's like it was expertly crafted for you to carry, so that when you pull whatever burden, whatever load you have to carry, it just pulls so much better because this was made for you. The burden's still there, but the burden is light. I was thinking of Jack London. You may remember he wrote Call of the Wild and White Fang. And in the book White Fang, he says, life reaches its apex when one does to the utmost that which he was called to do. When you live the life that you were made to live, when you follow through on the work that you were that was expertly made specifically for you to do, when you glorify God in the way that only you can glorify God with your particular struggles and your burden and the work that God has given you and all the good deeds that he has for you to do in his name. When you do that, you find that the life that God has for you is well fitting for the Christian. And so what that means for us is sometimes we are tired and we're weary and we're worn out and we need a break sometimes, and all of those may be true for you. But in those moments, if you're doing it God's way, if you're learning from him, he who is humble and gentle with us, even when we don't deserve it, when you're living life his way, you find that you were made for that life. There's 100 ways to solve your problems. There's 100 different ways to get through your day, but God's way is better for you. It was expertly crafted for you. So learn from him, because then you have rest, not just physically, you have rest for your souls, which means you can be bone tired, but your soul is at peace because you know you're working for the Lord, you're glorifying him, and that's a life that you were made to live. I hope this helps you. I hope that blesses you. Find rest in